There are moments in television history that stop you cold, moments where you forget you are watching a competition and instead find yourself witnessing something rare and genuine. The night a 13-year-old girl from a tiny village in northeast England walked onto the stage of America's Got Talent and opened her mouth, millions of people experienced exactly that. Her name was Courtney Hadwin, and nothing about what followed would be simple. This is the full story of her extraordinary rise, the painful losses that came with it, and the long, quiet road back to herself. Courtney Hadwin was born on July 6, 2004 in Hartlepool in County Durham, England. She grew up in Heselden, a small village where life moved at its own unhurried pace. Her parents, Marie and Paul Hadwin, were warm and hardworking people who recognized something different in their daughter from the very beginning. As a self-taught artist from a young age, Courtney spent countless hours absorbing the music of legends like Tina Turner, Etta James, and James Brown, teaching herself to feel sound before she had the formal language to describe it. She credits a single pivotal moment, watching a young girl perform on Britain's Got Talent when she was 9 years old, as the spark that first made her believe she could do it too. Her training was earnest and serious. She attended Schottenhall Theatre School, Peanuts Master Classes, Kate Sir's School of Music, and Julie Miles' Vocal Ovation. Week after week, she arrived at these programs not because her parents pushed her, but because the pull of music was something she could not explain and did not need to. She rehearsed vocal scales before school, studied breath control and phrasing, and chose songs not for their difficulty, but for the emotions they carried. She was the kind of student teachers remember, attentive, hungry, willing to be corrected. Every lesson was a brick she was laying towards something she could feel, but not yet fully see. In January 2018, she even sang at an event in Southampton for Youth Support, a charity raising funds for children with life-limiting illnesses and disabilities. She understood early that music was not just about her. By the time she was 12, she had already opened for Sister Sledge at a South Tyneside Festival concert in front of more than 18,000 people. That is not a footnote. That is a young artist who had already proved herself in front of a crowd larger than many professional musicians ever face. She was not an overnight discovery. She was a girl who had been quietly building herself into something remarkable, one rehearsal at a time. In 2017, she auditioned for The Voice Kids UK, where she performed Tina Turner's Nutbush City Limits and was selected by Judge Danny Jones as her mentor. She navigated the competition through the battle rounds and the semifinals, performing James Brown's I Got You, I Feel Good with a ferocity that left viewers stunned. For her final performance on the show, she sang, "And I Am Telling You I'm Not Going," a vocal mountain that most trained adults would hesitate to attempt. Though she did not win the competition, the experience deposited something valuable into her, a working knowledge of how cameras behave, how live broadcasts feel in your body, and how to carry yourself with composure when the pressure is highest. It also gave her something more intangible, the certainty that she could hold her own on a national stage. That confidence, quietly earned, was about to be called upon in a setting far larger than anything she had yet encountered. Then came 2018 and America's Got Talent, and everything changed at once. In the summer of that year, 13-year-old Courtney traveled to the United States with her father Paul to audition for the 13th season. She was visibly nervous as she stepped before the panel of judges, Simon Cowell, Howie Mandel, Heidi Klum, and Mel B, and the thousands of people filling the arena. She stood at the microphone, small inside a leather jacket, and then she began to sing Otis Redding's Hard to Handle. What happened next has been described by nearly everyone who witnessed it as something close to disbelief. The voice that came out of her did not seem to belong to a 13-year-old. It cracked and growled and soared. She stomped her foot, dropped to her knees, and moved with the kind of instinctive freedom that performers spend decades trying to find. Howie Mandel immediately rose from his seat and hit the golden buzzer, sending a cascade of gold confetti raining down on the stage. He told her plainly, "You are not from this era. You're from a whole different era." Simon Cowell shouted bloody hell and called her a lion. The audience was on its feet before she had even finished. The clip spread across social media that same night with a speed that felt almost violent. Within 1 week, it had been viewed more than 130 million times online. Eventually, that single audition video would surpass 300 million views on YouTube, a number that places it among the most watched talent show moments in internet history. News outlets compared her to Janis Joplin. Her hometown newspapers ran front-page stories. Messages poured in from fans in countries she had never visited. People writing to say her voice had moved them to tears, had reminded them of something they had lost, had given them something they needed. She moved through the competition with the same intensity she had brought to that first audition. In the quarterfinals, she performed James Brown's Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, earning another standing ovation from every judge. In the semifinals, she sang Steppenwolf's Born to Be Wild and advanced again. In the finals, she took on Tina Turner's River Deep Mountain High on the biggest stage of her life. She did not win the competition. She finished in 6th place with illusionist Shin Lim taking the top prize, but by that point, the competition's outcome felt almost beside the point. She had already won something larger and harder to measure. What followed the show, however, is where Courtney Hadwin's real story becomes both extraordinary and genuinely heartbreaking. Because fame, especially the kind that arrives in a single viral moment, has a way of creating enormous expectations that the machinery behind it is not always equipped to fulfill. And for Courtney, the gap between what the public expected and what actually happened in the years following AGT became the defining trial of her young life. In December 2018, she signed a record deal with Simon Cowell's Psycho Entertainment in partnership with Arista Records, a Sony music label. Cowell said publicly that he would never forget her first audition and that he was genuinely excited about her future. Arista's president David Massey called her an exceptional talent with a voice and spirit well beyond her years. Courtney herself described it as a dream come true, saying she had always wanted to write original songs and that the chance to do so while staying true to herself felt almost unreal. In 2019, she returned to television for America's Got Talent, The Champions, where she performed an original song called Pretty Little Thing to another standing ovation from all 4 judges. She released a covers album called The Cover Sessions that same year, recording songs by artists including Harry Styles and Lil Nas X, evidence of a young artist with broad musical instincts who could inhabit a wide range of material. She was also booked to perform at the 50th anniversary edition of Woodstock in August 2019. That booking carried enormous symbolic weight. Woodstock had been the crucible where rock and soul legends burned themselves into history during the summer of 1969. Being asked to perform at its anniversary was an acknowledgement that the music world saw something of that lineage in a girl from County Durham. Then, just days before the festival was scheduled to begin, Woodstock 50 collapsed entirely due to catastrophic organizational failures. Permits were revoked, investors withdrew, and the event dissolved before it could happen. For Courtney, who had dreamed of standing on that kind of hallowed ground, the cancellation was another reminder that the path between promise and permanence is rarely a straight line. She was 15 years old, watching another door close before she could walk through it. The years that followed became the quieter, more private tragedy of Courtney Hadwin's story. After the initial explosion of attention, something shifted. No full studio album appeared. Her social media presence went silent. Her Instagram was wiped clean, as though she were erasing herself from view. Fans who had followed her journey with devotion began asking the same question in comment sections and forums. What happened to her? The answer, it turned out, was not dramatic in the way that gossip tends to demand. It was the slower, more suffocating kind of difficult. When Psycho Records closed its doors in 2020, Courtney found herself without a label home at an age 16, when most people are still figuring out who they are. The momentum that had felt unstoppable had stalled. The industry machine that had lifted her up had simply moved on, the way industry machines always do when the next sensation arrives. She had been championed publicly by Simon Cowell, described as the future of music compared to Janis Joplin, and then, in the span of a label closure, she was on her own. She later reflected on it plainly, saying that she had disappeared to rebuild and was now fully doing it her way. That sentence contains within it the weight of years. And rebuild she did, though not quickly and not loudly. The heartbreak of that period, the label closure, the years without a proper debut album, the experience of being globally famous as a child and then suddenly navigating the world without that scaffolding, is real, even if it does not fit neatly into a single dramatic moment. There is a particular kind of grief in being discovered at 13 and then having to figure out, alone, how to become an adult artist in a world that primarily remembers you as a sensation. Courtney Hadwin lived that grief for years before anyone outside her immediate circle was paying close attention. What makes her story ultimately one of resilience rather than ruin is what she chose to do with the silence. She wrote, "She studied her craft with the same seriousness she had brought to those early rehearsals in County Durham. She worked with Grammy-winning producer Kevin Bowe from Minneapolis, building a creative partnership rooted entirely in authenticity rather than commercial calculation. She released independent singles, Breakable, That Girl Don't Live Here, Call Me Back, Monsters, each one showcasing a voice and an artistic identity that had deepened considerably from the raw teenager the world had first encountered. These were not covers of famous songs. They were windows into a person who had been through something and had found language for it. In an interview with Fault magazine, she reflected on why the debut album had taken so long, and her answer revealed how seriously she had come to take her own artistry. She had wanted the songs to be drawn from real experiences, which she simply hadn't accumulated enough of when she was younger. That kind of patience, the willingness to wait until you have something true to say rather than releasing something hollow, because the moment demands it, is rare in any artist, let alone one who became famous at 13. In September 2025, she finally released that debut album, Little Miss Jagged, a record that blends soul, rock, funk, and punk in ways that feel entirely her own rather than borrowed or assembled for commercial appeal. She sold out a headlining show in London. She booked a UK and Portugal tour. She announced more dates. The audience that had been waiting for her, it turned out, had not gone anywhere. She also rebuilt her Instagram from scratch, captioning one post simply, "Not a girl anymore." Courtney Hadwin's tragedy is not the kind that announces itself with a single catastrophic event. It is the kind that accumulates quietly in the gap between what the world expects of a phenomenon and what a human being can actually sustain. She was handed a thunderbolt at 13 and asked to hold it steady while growing up. The label deal that was supposed to launch her career instead led to years of professional uncertainty when that label folded. They